Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the first public speaking course of 2022 to be provided by publicspeakingtuition.com. For those of you that don't know me, my name is John Dove, and I am the founder of publicspeakingtuition.com. Before I start, I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself, just in case you don't know who I am. So I've been doing public speaking for many years now, providing training both on an individual level and on a group basis. Now, my background in public speaking comes from my career as a criminal lawyer, and I've appeared in courts across the country. I'm also a member of the Speakers Club, so I've been involved in many speaking competitions and provided a number of after dinner speeches over the years as well. So this is the first of a three-part public speaking course. The first part tonight is probably the one that most people would be interested in actual fact. I'll be looking at the fear of public speaking and how we can improve our confidence. Next week, I'm going to be looking at how to develop rapport with the audience. And then in the final session, which will take place in 2 weeks' time, I'll be looking at effective techniques for public speaking. So I've entitled that one, How to Make Your Speech Flow. So in terms of tonight's session, I'm going to start by talking through some theory about the fear of public speaking. I'll then go on and I'll open the floor up for a Q&A session. So during the evening, if you have any questions, you can feel free at the end to either pop your hand up or pop some questions into the chat box. Feel free to pop the questions in as we go as well, and I can answer those questions. So without further ado, I will jump into tonight's session. Now, this session is being provided online, so we're on Zoom. Normally, if I was talking about the fear of public speaking, I would open with a question and I would say, hands up, who here has ever experienced fear? Sadly, I'm not in person with you guys, so I can't really ask a question like that. But I'm sure we can all agree that at some point or another, we've all experienced some form of fear, whether it would be a fear of spiders, fear of planes, fear of heights, whatever it is, we all experience some form of fear. And the fear of public speaking is probably one of the most common fears across the globe. Now, I will open this one up to the chat box. I'll see if anyone gets this. Does anybody know what the fear of public speaking is called? Okay, can't see any typing there. Stage fright. The answer is glossophobia. That's the correct term for the fear of public speaking. Now, from my point of view, I find this to be quite an unusual fear, because if you think about it, you take any person who's got a fear of public speaking and you put them in an everyday situation, a normal conversation with family, friends, work colleagues. They could talk for hours about things that they're knowledgeable on. So their hobbies, their pets, the sports that they're interested in, anything like that. They could talk naturally for hours on end. You say to that same person, you're now going to give a presentation on your pets and put two people in front of them. And that natural level of public speaking seems to go away. They wouldn't be able to speak in the same way that they would. And it's bizarre because you're using exactly the same skills. All you're doing is talking to other people. But we seem to put public speaking on a pedestal once we throw that title in. So what I'm going to look at tonight, ladies and gentlemen, is where the fear comes from, why the fear is quite natural, actually, and nothing to worry about. And I'll be looking at how we can overcome that fear, how we can improve, and how we can use preparation to actually improve our confidence. So let's start by looking at the fear of public speaking itself. So for me, I would break this down into a number of subcategories, a number of sub-fears that formulate this overall fear of public speaking. And the first aspect to this, and the first reason I believe that people have a fear of public speaking, is because of the fear of failure. So if you think about it, we go through life being pre-programmed to avoid failure. So think about when you're at school and you're given a piece of coursework, a piece of homework, whatever it might be. You'll hand it in, The teacher marks that piece of work, and everything that you get wrong, you mark down on. You seem to have failed. Equally, another example, let's say you play sports. You'll be part of a team, you'll play the game, and you go out there and you play to win. If you lose, you fail. So as humans, we're always trying to avoid failure, and we're always looking for perfection. So what happens is a lot of people who don't do public speaking and are then suddenly required to give a speech or a presentation will think, well, I've not done this before. It's going to be hard. I'm going to fail, and then naturally shut down. And that's where part of the fear comes from. The second aspect of this, and it sort of stems on from the first point, is a fear of ridicule or embarrassment. So once again, as humans, we really don't want to be embarrassed. We don't like it. And we have this real fear that if we go out in public, give a presentation, it's going to go horribly wrong. And the audience will be there laughing at us, judging us for every time we stop, every time we can't get a word out. We're afraid that the audience are going to judge us. And the reality is, that's not the case. If you're giving a presentation and you've got an audience there, the chances are they've come to listen to you for some reason or another. Either you're an expert in the field, or you've been required to speak to a group of people. So they've come to listen to you, not necessarily to judge your public speaking skills. So it's almost a misnomer to think that the audience are there to judge you. It's something that's just sort of in your head. They're not there to laugh. Well, let's play devil's advocate for a moment. Let's say, for argument's sake, you do go out, you give a presentation. It's terrible. The audience are in fits of laughter. They're judging you. So what? In 15 minutes time after this presentation's over, they don't remember what's gone on. They're in their car going home. It'll probably live on in your head, but the audience who were there laughing, they don't care about it anymore. And from your point of view, you've had a terrible experience. You've hit rock bottom. It can't really get much worse. So it's a good learning experience that you can pick up on some of the mistakes and improve for the future. So what I would say is, firstly, the audience aren't there to judge, but even if it goes badly, that's natural. It happens. You'll learn from it and you'll move on. And then the last reason that I see people have a fear of public speaking is competence or lack thereof. So once again, you take an inexperienced speaker, they've been required to give a presentation, and straight away they'll probably go online and watch people give speeches, or they've seen other people give presentations, and they'll think, well, that person is a natural, that person's great at speaking. I can't do that. That's not me. But the reality is, when we compare that inexperienced speaker and somebody who's very competent, very polished, very engaging, the only real difference for the main part is the level of experience. Now, granted, there are some people out there that have the gift of the gab and they're naturally talented, but those people are few and far between. The bulk of really good and really competent speakers have been terrible at one point. They've picked up the skill, practiced it, and honed it over many years. So one thing that you can take away is that everybody has the ability to be a good public speaker. It's like most skills, it can be learned, and through practice, you can develop that skill. So the question at this stage becomes, we know what the fear is, we know where that fear has come from. How do we overcome this? How do we get past that? The first thing that I would say to you is, don't worry. Don't be afraid that you've got that fear. It's absolutely normal. And the reason that the fear exists is because it's almost the fear of the unknown. You're going outside of your comfort zone. You're speaking to a large group. You're not used to doing it. You're relying upon skills that you've never used before. So naturally, you're going to be fearful. And when you come to deliver your first presentation, this is going to manifest itself through a number of symptoms. So you'll find that you might have sweaty palms, an increased heart rate. There'll be a number of different telltale signs for each individual person. And that is completely normal. It's nothing to worry about. As I say, the reason for that is because you're outside of your comfort zone. And what will happen is, over time, the more that you practice public speaking, the more that you deliver speeches, you'll find that you'll become more confident. You'll find that your competence increases, and these symptoms will actually die down over time. The reality is they're never going to go away. And the reason that I say that is because it's a scary skill. No matter how experienced you become, you'll always have an element of fear there. Even myself, I still experience butterflies in my stomach, and most competent public speakers do at the start of their presentation. And the reason for that is that's almost the anticipation. And used correctly, it can be used almost as adrenaline to fuel your presentation. So whereas an inexperienced speaker might get the sweaty hands, the butterflies, and think, oh, this is terrible, and they get worked up, the experienced speaker still has some of those symptoms, but realizes that's the excitement, that's what's keeping them on edge. They're about to do something difficult, and that's the fuel that gets that experienced speaker through the speech. So as I say, those elements are never going to go away. And what will happen is over time, you'll learn to control those. And the best way that I would say to control these is to really nail down the first aspect of your speech, the first few words, the first sentence, really have that drilled into your brain. I'm going to touch upon preparation later, but this is the key thing, because if you don't remember anything else, always remember the first few words, because that's your starting point of the presentation. So you might be required just to, I don't know, stand up in a meeting to give your speech. It could be you going up to a stage, go to a lectern. But when you're there, you'll experience these symptoms, you'll experience the butterflies. But as long as you've got those first few words there, once you deliver those, the rest of the speech will come back to you almost like a muscle memory, and you'll get into the flow. And what you'll find is that once you're about 30 seconds, maybe a minute in, those symptoms, the butterflies, tend to have gone away. By that point, they'll have disappeared. You're into the flow, and it's almost like you're back practicing again. So the key point I would say is really nail down the first few words of the speech and get that drilled in. The second point to remember as well, when you go up on stage and you've got those nerves, you've got the butterflies, etc., is don't feel like you're in a rush to jump into the speech. So what I see a lot of people do is they'll go up and they think, right, the audience are waiting for me. I need to rush in and just get into this. Remember that your audience, whoever it might be, it could be just, could be in work, you're giving a presentation, it could be to a room of 500 people. It doesn't matter. They are there to listen to you. You're the speaker, you're the presenter, you're the person that's in control. So go up, gather your thoughts. You don't have to rush into the speech. Take a few seconds to look around the room, maybe make eye contact with a few of your audience members. Make sure that you gather your breath. So take a deep breath if you need to, so you're not out of breath when you start talking. If you need a quick sip of water, take a sip of water, and then start in your own time. And that might take 5-10 seconds, and it will feel like a lifetime in your head, but it's there just to control you. Make sure that when you actually start the presentation, you're starting on your terms and that you're ready to go. So the next aspect, and probably one of the most important things that I see in terms of how to overcome nerves and how to improve your confidence, is proper preparation. Now, if you don't prepare properly for a speech, you're going to be nervous, and quite rightly so, because if you've got this fear of public speaking anyway, and you've not prepared the speech properly, well, the likelihood is it may well go wrong on the day. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you've prepared properly for the speech. And that really is half the battle in overcoming any confidence issues. So the first thing I would say is, let's look at the aspects that we need to avoid when it comes to preparation. One thing to try and avoid is learning a speech word for word. It's never going to work, because if you're going to try and go on stage without a script and have every single word nailed down in your head, it's never going to happen. No good speech is delivered the same twice. There's always slight variations every single time you deliver a presentation. So to try and learn every word isn't going to happen at all. And even if you could, it will appear quite wooden when you give the presentation, almost as if you're searching for a script in your head. And the problem that this causes is that if you've learned every single word in the right order, if you trip up at any point on the real occasion, you're going to be completely lost. So there are better ways to prepare. So the way that I would go about this is I tend to, when I know I've got a presentation coming up, I would actually write it out word for word as a complete piece of prose. Now, it sounds like I'm just about to contradict myself now, but I'll explain where the distinction is in just a moment. So I'll write it out in full. You know, it could be, just picking a figure now, let's say it's 5 pages of A4. That's how long the speech is. And what I will do is the first few times that I deliver that presentation in practice, I might do 3 or 4 times where I physically read from the piece of paper, you know, looking down, practicing in that way. Don't take my eyes away, just literally reading the speech as it is on the piece of paper. And that's good for a number of reasons. Firstly, it helps me to learn the content. So I'm really embedding that content into my brain. But secondly, when you actually read it out loud, you might think to yourself, well, okay, that I could change that sentence. I could throw that word in there. That sentence could go up there. That part doesn't sound great. I'll take that out. Oh, I need to emphasize this section. So by doing it that way and physically reading it out from the paper word for word the first 3-4 times, it's a good way of achieving those aspects. Then once you've maybe read through it 3 or 4 times, maybe chopped and changed small aspects, you then should have the bulk of your speech sort of in your brain. And what I would say at this stage is to practice again, maybe another 3 or 4 times. And what you would do is this time, as you're glancing down at the paper, you might see the first few words of a sentence and the rest of it will come back to you. The rest of the sentence will be there because you'll recall it from having read it previously several times. So lift your eyes up from the paper at this stage. Finish the sentence without looking down. So you might look down, read the first few words, finish your head up, glance down again for the next sentence. And you might even be able to get a few sentences out without looking at the paper. I should confirm this is practice on your own, you know, in front of a wall, the mirror, whatever it might be. But this is the way that you would really learn the content. So by this point, you've possibly practiced the speech maybe 8 times, possibly even 10 times. And the content should really be quite embedded in your brain now. And what you can do is you can take that that script, which maybe, you know, fills 4 or 5 pages of A4, and you can replace it with bullet points instead. So let's say you had a paragraph which was 6 sentences all about the cat sitting on the mat. You could replace that to cat on mat. So that's a bullet point. And because you've read it so many times, the majority of the sentences will come back to you. So you'll practice, you'll glance down and you'll see it says cat on mat. And then you could probably deliver the majority of that paragraph without even needing to look back at what you've seen there. You know the content that well. But what's good now is because you've not got the script, you're not reading from it, it will come out slightly differently each time. So there might be certain words that come out differently. There might be certain sentences that you forget or don't say because they don't actually add anything to it. So each and every time that you're practicing now, the speech is always going to come out differently, but you're learning the speech much better at this stage because you're not physically relying upon a script. So what you want to do is continue to practice at this stage. There's no limit to the amount of times that you can practice. And I think the more nervous you are, the more you want to practice that presentation. And particularly, you know, if you've got a PowerPoint that's going to go with it, you know, really learn it with all of those aspects incorporated. And what that means is that when you come to deliver the real thing, you know in the back of your mind that you've delivered it at home several times correctly. So you know that there's a good chance that you can do that. What you also want to do is once you've really practiced the speech and you know it quite well, try and talk about the topic or the content in everyday conversation. So, you know, if you're talking to family, friends, whoever, talk about it in everyday conversation, because once again, it's just a way of embedding the content in your brain even more. But because you're speaking to people about it and speaking in conversation, the words will come out much more naturally. And that will actually help you when it comes to delivering the presentation itself. But more importantly, because you're actually speaking to another person, you'll understand how part of your content will be received by the audience on the day of the presentation itself. So it's just a way of familiarizing yourself with the content even more. So I've dealt with preparation. The next aspect, which I think is quite important, is mindset. So you need to put yourself in the right frame of mind leading up to the presentation. And there's two aspects in relation to mindset, which I think are particularly important. And the first has to do with the audience itself, because what a lot of people do leading up to a presentation is they've practiced, they've drafted the speech, they know it to a good degree, but then they'll think, well, this isn't that important. It's not an entertaining speech. It's not informative. It doesn't do what it needs to. I'm not the right person to talk about this. I'm not qualified. So they talk themselves down about the speech itself. What you need to remind yourself is that, you know, if you've been invited somewhere to give a presentation, or you're giving a talk on something that you're interested in, you think is important, you need to sell yourself on the importance of that presentation. Because if you've got any of those niggling doubts in your head, well, when you come to give the talk itself, you're not going to be able to give 100%. If you're doubting how important the speech is, whether you're actually qualified to talk about it, the passion won't be there. You won't be able to give it 100%. So any of those doubts, give yourself a self-talk. Remind yourself why you're the person to talk about the speech. Remind yourself why it is important. Remind yourself why this is a good presentation. And you'll be able to overcome that aspect. Now, one way of doing that potentially is practicing in front of family and friends. You know, it doesn't have to be many people, but it gives you a small taste of delivering to an audience. And if family and friends say, no, that's a good speech, I like that, at least you've got some affirmation in your mind there that what you're talking about is sensible, it makes sense, and people will enjoy the presentation. The second aspect in relation to mindset is foreseeing the speech going well. So one thing that people are very good at is talking themselves down. You know, you think about at university, people going on, oh, I've not prepared for this seminar, it's not going to go well, etc. And people do the same thing when they've got a presentation. Oh, I'm not a public speaker, oh, didn't do this enough, it's not going to go well. And they foresee everything going wrong. They foresee themselves tripping over lines, tripping over walking to the stage, forgetting aspects of the speech, ums and ahs, whatever it might be. They foresee it going wrong. Now, if you've prepared the speech properly, practiced regularly, and it's gone well in practice, there's absolutely no reason why the presentation can't go well on the day itself when you come to deliver the real thing. So what you need to do is tell yourself that it's going to go well. If it's gone well in practice, remind yourself it can go well on the day. So you need to avoid any thoughts of, oh, this isn't going to go well, it's going to go wrong, it's going to be a failure. You need to tell yourself the speech and the presentation will go well, and actually foresee the speech going well. You know, envisage the audience applauding at the end or laughing at the funny parts or whatever it might be, whatever reaction you're hoping for from the audience. Envision that in your mind leading up to the presentation. So I've talked about the fear of public speaking, where it comes from, and how we can overcome that fear. I think the key message really is practice makes perfect. The more you practice, the better you'll become. And I think that to become a truly confident speaker, you need to be delivering to audiences more regularly. Now, unless you are somebody that, I don't know, regularly gives after dinner speeches or regularly gives presentations to big audiences, you might not have the opportunity to do that. But you can think much smaller to use that experience. So, you know, if you're in class and you've got the opportunity to put your hand up and ask questions, do that. It might only be 10, 15 seconds of advocacy or presentation, but that's a small aspect of public speaking. If you belong to a club where you've got the chance to talk in front of a small group, take that opportunity. The more that you speak in these smaller environments, the more confident you'll become, and it will just naturally grow. So almost like a compounding effect, and you'll have more opportunity to practice and improve your public speaking. So those are my general tips and points in relation to the fear of public speaking and how to improve your confidence. I hope that I've covered most of the points that were dealt with in the pre-submitted questions as well. What I'm going to do now is I'll open the floor to any questions from the audience. So if you want to pop it in the chat, or if you want to come on the microphone, I'm more than happy to answer any questions you might have. How do you suggest one deal with when they freeze? Right, okay, that's a very interesting question. Something that I'm asked quite regularly. Now, when you come to give a presentation, the chances are things can go wrong. No matter how much you practice, things can always go wrong on the day, because the reality is giving a talk to whoever the real audience are is always completely different to speaking to the mirror, or even speaking to a couple of family and friends. So there is a real different aspect there, and there's no way of getting around that. You can experience nerves when you come to the day itself. If you do find that for any reason, you trip up, you might forget where you're up to in the presentation, you simply freeze, whatever it is, calm down, take a breath. The audience know, there's no way of hiding it. The audience know that you've tripped up. They know that something's gone wrong. So there's no point trying to hide it. And the other thing that I see people do is they go, oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I've forgotten where I'm up to. Oh. And then they just flounder and then almost kind of give up at that point. Don't despair. It happens. It happens to absolutely everyone. So at this point, if anything goes wrong, you freeze, you trip up, you forget your lines, take a second, take a breath, have a quick drink of water if you need to. Normally, I've spoken about learning a presentation. You might still have notes with you. You might have the full presentation in front of you. You might have bullet points. Take a second just to take a glance down and look where you're up to. And then in your own time, just carry on. The audience will forgive you for it. They know that it's gone wrong. They know that you've forgotten something, tripped up, frozen, whatever. So just take a second, compose yourself, find where you're up to in the presentation if you need to, and then go back into it. Don't let it put you off. You know that a little part's gone wrong, but that won't detract from the overall speech or the presentation itself. So that's my main thing. If something goes wrong, don't panic. Don't think it's all over. Don't sort of don't give up. That's the main point that I can say. Just calm down, take a breath, look at the notes if you need to, and carry on. Right. Does anyone else have any questions at all? Okay, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for your participation tonight. I hope everybody has enjoyed the course. We'll be back next week, and I will see you then.